During the City Council meeting on February 1st, the Barrie Police Service presented its 2023 budget to the City Council. Chair of the Barrie Police Services Board, Craig Ferguson, was joined by Police Chief Rich Johnston to present the budget. The police asked for a total of $63 million from the city, which is 4.2 million more than the last year. It is a 7.28% increase year over year. Chair Craig Ferguson argued that the additional funding will go towards increases in salary, overtime, health insurance, and retirement systems. He said the additional funding would also be used to hire 5 more frontline police officers. Barrie Police currently has 250 officers. To support his ask for more money, Ferguson said Barrie has a lower population to police officers ratio than the federal and provincial governments. However, he did not offer any explanation as to why cities like Sudbury could function with even lower ratio. He said Barrie Police budget has been decreasing in percentage terms compared to its population, but he failed to mention that the budget has been increasing in absolute dollar terms. Business plan and budget deliberations will be carried out on February 8th and 9th, and final approval will be given by the Council on February 15, 2023.
We have 3 presentations this evening. The presentations will be from the Barrie Police Services Board, the Barrie Public Library, and the County of Simcoe regarding the budgets. I'd like to invite the Police Board Chair and the Police Chief to the podium for the presentation this evening. Before the Chair and the Chief are to make their presentation, after the presentation, Council will be afforded the opportunity to ask questions. There's some reminders I wanted to make sure that we were all familiar with beforehand in terms of the request from the Police Board and what our opportunities are and aren't to influence that. And also remind members of Council through this process, and if we do dig into it in questions, I'm sure it'll come up further, that the police budget doesn't naturally expand like the city's budget in terms of as units are added to the city of Barrie, they aren't able to automatically reap some of those new taxes that come out. Those are controlled through the budget requests and approvals from the police service and our council. With all that in mind, Mr. Chair, if you would like to start your presentation, and we will, sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nettle. I have to declare here, in order to meet my legislative requirements under Section 17, Sub 3 of the Police Services Act, I will not participate in this presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I apologize for not going to you sooner. Mr. Chair, you may now begin your presentation, and following that, there will be some questions from members of Council, I'm sure.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Nuttall, Deputy Mayor Thompson, and members of Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Barrie Police Services budget request for 2023. I'm joined here by our newly sworn Chief Johnston, who we'll hear from in a moment. After several months of planning and decision-making, the team at the Barrie Police Service presented a draft budget to the Board's Budget Subcommittee and in turn the Board. After detailed review, the 2023 budget request was approved on October 27 in an open public meeting. The Board believes the 2023 budget request is necessary, physically responsible, and provides sustainable police service delivery to the citizens of Barrie. 2023 marks the start of Barrie Police's new strategic plan, and this year's budget will support 3 key strategic priorities: prevent and address crime, leverage partnerships to reduce social disorder, and build a resilient organization. The budget supports the city's community safety and well-being plan, as well as fulfilling core policing responsibilities, increase public expectations, and ensure sustainable and evidence-based delivery of police services while addressing increased financial pressures. Salaries, benefits, and overtime. The Barrie Police Service continues to provide critical services to the community through investments made in infrastructure, equipment, technology, training, and most importantly, its people. The Board recognizes the members of the service are the community's greatest asset, and through the sworn officers and civilians, the service provides a wide range of services to our community. Salaries, benefits, and overtime at $56.5 million represent 94.4% of the 2023 budget request and are directly reflected in the services provided to the community. Included in the budget request is the impact of contractual salary increases, reclassifications and promotions, retirements, and new 2023 hires. The Barrie Police Service partners with the City of Barrie to achieve economies of scale with respect to benefit providers. However, budget pressures are still being experienced through increased usage and provider rates in health, dental, long-term disability, life insurance, and OMERS premiums. Maximum contributions for Canada Pension Plan and employment insurance are also increasing. Legislative impacts. The Supporting Ontario's First Responders Act was introduced in 2016 and provides WSIB benefits for emergency responders experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. The financial impact of this legislation has been significant for police services across the province since its introduction and will continue to result in financial pressures for several years to come. Members' wellness has, is, and will always be the top priority for the Barrie Police Service. The total salary and benefits cost for members supported by the legislation in 2023 will represent an increase of 30.5% from 2022. Unavoidable increases. Without an increase in the current year's staffing numbers, 2023 salaries would result in a budgetary increase of 3.5%. Related benefits would require a further increase of 1.7%. Assuming the 2022 overtime budget is maintained, the budget request will increase by 5.2%. Salaries and benefits for members who are supported by the Supporting Ontario's First Responders Act will add another 1.5% budgetary increase. Salaries, benefits, and overtime using 2022 staffing levels result in a 6.7% increase to the 2023 budget. Authorized and actual sworn officers. The 2023 budget includes the addition of 5 sworn officers and 4 civilian positions. Despite the growth of the city, this marks the first increase in sworn officers since 2020 and in alignment with the approved staffing plan that has been strategically gapped for the last 2 years. I'd like to call upon Chief Johnston to share the impact of the new hires we'll have on the Barrie Police Service and our community. Chief Johnston.
Thank you, Board Chair. Mayor, councillors, our commitment, the Barrie Police Services commitment, is to the community. We are frontline focused in ensuring our resources are providing the services that our community expects. With finite resources, we are dedicated to put as much as possible to the operational level of our organization and the supports that allow us to effectively and efficiently leverage our greatest strength, our people. Through our sworn officers and civilians, we provide a range of policing services to the community, including crime prevention, investigative services for crimes against person, human trafficking, tech crimes, homicide, fraud, traffic, and many others. All of our services support and seek to improve community safety and well-being. Community safety and well-being is not a line item in a budget. It is part of our ethos. Our 5 new hires will be frontline uniform officers going directly to frontline policing. And our civilian positions will support high-harm, evidence-based policing and member wellness. The majority of our sworn officers are in community-focused frontline policing roles, including those we have supporting our joint efforts with our community agency partners. These new positions will strengthen our capabilities, responsiveness, and resilience to better meet expectations. Police legitimacy, in part, relies on a public safety organization's ability to effectively carry out its duties. These personnel will continue to help the Barrie Police Service maintain the safety and security of our growing community for a safer tomorrow, today. Chair.
Thank you, Chief Johnston. These additions to the staffing level will increase the 2023 budget by 0.47%. Officer ratios. This slide demonstrates data collected by Statistics Canada, which notes the number of officers per 100,000 in population, also known as cop to pop. You can see that between 2018 and 2019, we grew from 158 to 160 officers per 100,000. However, by 2021, that ratio had dropped to 156 officers, which reflects the growing population and a lack of growth in the number of sworn officers. When compared to similar-sized municipalities, the Barrie Police Services is in the middle of the pack, but well below the provincial average in 2021 of 176 officers per 100,000, and even farther below the national average of 183 officers per 100,000 population. Operating expenditures represent 7.9% of the total, 7.9 million, of the total budget request. Operating expenditures include facility costs, insurance, vehicle gasoline and maintenance, staff development and wellness initiatives, uniforms and equipment, operating supplies, and technology infrastructure. Costs associated with grant expenditures are included in operating expenses and have increased $594,000 from 2022. This is directly related to increased grant revenue. As grant revenues increase, so do grant expenditures. The main operating expenditures include IT maintenance, which incorporates costs associated with software costs for body-worn cameras, firewall upgrades, and enhancement of information technology security protocols. The service has also seen increase due to inflation. As in prior years, all operating expenditures have been reviewed and reductions were made where feasible. Revenue. The final area of the operating budget is grants, secondments, and other revenue. Total revenue and recoveries for 2023 is $6.9 million, which is an increase of $1.28 million over 2022. Overall, the 2023 budget request includes $662,000 in increased grant revenue. The service continues to apply for all available funding opportunities. In 2013, revenue was $1.6 million. In 2023, the service successfully generates $6.9 million in revenues. Transfers to capital reserve. The service transfers to capital reserve represents $1.88 million and includes costs for fleet vehicles, I-2 equipment, and specialized police equipment and radios. This amount takes into account projected cost increases across those industries. It's important to note that in 2010, the Barrie Police Service capital budget was $1.6 million. The City of Barrie radio system upgrade includes a transfer to the city of $220,000. This commitment to the city continues to 2029. The funding requirements commenced in 2014, and we've contributed approximately $1.5 million to date. Budget recap. Here's a visual aid showing the breakdown of the 2023 budget requirements. Our transfer to capital of 1.9, legislative impacts of 3.7, the revenue we will generate of just under 7 million, operating expenditures just under 8, salary, benefits, and overtime of $56.6 million. Policing budget and the Barrie population. This chart illustrates the percentage of the Barrie police budget of the City of Barrie's overall budget, which has been declining despite the rising population of the City of Barrie. In 2011, we comprised 25.1% of the city's budget. We currently sit at 22.1%. This illustrates how increasingly challenging it has been to maintain sustainable police service in a growing city like Barrie. After a lengthy and deliberate process, the board is satisfied that this is the municipal funding that is required to provide adequate and effective police services in 2023. It is comprised of its operating budget, its capital request, and legislative items for a total municipal funding requirement of $63,239,000. Mayor Nuttall, Deputy Mayor Thompson, members of council, and the citizens of Barrie, we as a board recognize this as a significant funding request, especially in these increasingly difficult times. However, we believe it is vital we get back to the sworn and civilian levels planned and approved by the board. Of the 20 police services we surveyed, we found requests as low as 2.5% and as high as 11.5%. We feel this is in a reasonable range. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to present the Barrie Police Service 2023 budget request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief Johnston, for your presentation this evening. I'm sure there'll be questions around the table. I'm going to kick off with a couple. And I sit here not as a member of the Police Services Board, obviously, but as the Mayor of the City of Barrie, although I do sit in both positions. My question, Mr. Chair, is does your proposed budget provide a full complement of officers to the City of Barrie this year?
At full complement in terms of planning 250 sworn officers, but due to the Ontario First Responders Act, there's approximately 19 members of the service. I think it's 14 sworn officers and 5 civilians that are not available for that complement. And then there'll be other officers and civilians that are off for obvious things such as maternity, long-term disability, et cetera. So the numbers do not include, are not the numbers that are fully deployed.
In terms of full complement of officers, what is that number, just to confirm? Is it 250?
250, correct.
And what was the last time that we had a full complement of officers?
I think we'd have to go back to 2020.
To 2020?
Yeah, 2019.
2019?
It's been since 2020, we have not.
Okay, thank you. In terms of fees, and members of council, we're going to have a number of presentations this evening that will include budgets that include a whole bunch of different items. One of the unique things that I found as I was going through the budget binders and the service requests was the fees associated with the service that each of these organizations deliver. And I'll give you an example. If there's a fine laid by the Conservation Authority, the funds go to the Conservation Authority. If there's something the County Simcoe charges a fee for, they go to the County of Simcoe. If the police lays a fine, it goes towards court costs. It doesn't go towards the frontline service. And I thought that was it's the only one that stood out that way. Every other one stood out in a, that the revenue created went to the bottom line of the organization that was presenting this evening. I'll open up to members of council for questions. Are there any questions on my left? Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and thank you, Mr. Ferguson and Chief Johnston. Appreciate the presentation, and I also, fully disclose I'm taking the evidence-based policing course right now through Cambridge University. Thank you to the encouragement of Chief Johnston. So a little bit of knowledge can be dangerous, so I apologize in advance. But I do appreciate your perspective and your use of evidence to inform policing, and I recognize, and as many would who've taken the course, policing traditionally hasn't done a good job of using evidence and data to inform how it uses its finite resources. So I appreciate that that's a position you're taking to help move us forward. Am I correct that a lot of the challenges, and you mentioned a discrepancy in police budget increases from 2.5 to 11 point something, is some of this kind of embedded in that there's no clear standard for a cop-to-pop ratio? Like, you show the ratio, and it's great. We're not in the high end, not in the low end. We're kind of in a sweet spot. But is it a sweet spot? It just is what it is? And is there work happening in the police sector to try to create some sort of standard so we would know that for a population of 100,000 people, you would have X amount of officers, not ours is here, so it's pretty good, or ours is there, it's way too high, or like, is that type of evaluation coming?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris. At the board level, we don't look at that detail, but I can certainly advise council that in terms of evidence-based policing, and developing our model to police the city of Barrie, we are considered leaders in that industry, and certainly Chief Johnston is considered a leader. So, you know, we are looking for opportunities to change the way we police. And that one of those ways is certainly by way of evidence-based policing. As to how that ratio works out with other agencies, I wouldn't be able to comment.
So thank you. As a follow-up, so one of the emerging, I think is emerging, is accreditation standards for policing. Is that something that is on the Barrie Police Services radar?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris. I'm sorry, could you just repeat it for me, please?
Yeah, accreditation standards for policing. There's some services that are using accreditation standards. Is that something that's on the radar?
It's not on the board radar, Chief Johnston.
I can speak to that, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Through you, Mayor. So there is no actual national nor provincial accreditation. There are some out of California, out of the U.S., and there's various organizations or state level. At a national level, the benchmarking of police services does not exist in any substantial way. That doesn't mean that that can't happen. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. Provincially, Ontario is a very progressive province and has some of the most progressive services in it, and certainly that is something to be explored. The Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police has been pushing that, but so has the Police Association of Ontario. There is a desire to see that, and I think that's in a more towards a transparent way of moving forward as a police service.
Yeah, thank you. And again, in support of what you do, it just feels like if there was more certainty, it would create a little less challenge. And I reflect back on every year we do a budget allocation tool. In 2021, the findings, such that they are, was overall interest in a decrease. 2022, overall interest in an increase in services. So, you know, maybe that suggests the tool is not accurate, or what it might suggest is interest in policing. But you know, whether it's more police, less police, I think we all want better policing, and I appreciate that evidence-based policing approach really tries to drill down on that. Is there something that you could highlight to us as far as better policing that you look forward to in this budget that will contribute to better policing?
Through you, Mayor. Fair question. In my world, certainly I would see the metric of a measurement of harm year over year, and appreciating we have crime happens in any community, and an effective police service is not about just reducing the number of crimes, but the types of crime. And so when we talk about the types of crime, I speak about harm, and harm is the actual societal effect of crime types on a community, and that is the focus of the Barrie Police. We are concerned about all crime, and that is not to minimize the victimization of someone who is a victim of a what at a broad level might be a lower level crime, a small mischief or a small theft. There are no small crimes if you are the victim and it hurts. And I'm not trying to suggest that's the case, but the reality is at a societal and a community level, we look at the harm from crime. And I wouldn't suggest that anyone at the council would think that a small mischief and a violent sexual assault are in any way, shape, or form similar. One is far more harmful, but they both count as one crime each. At the Barrie Police Service, we are looking at the harm created from that more serious crime, and we're taking our finite resources and we are focusing on those. We are not forgetting the lower level crimes. We are looking at more effective and more efficient ways of exploring how to respond to those.
That's all for me. Thank you very much. I appreciate that focus on harm reduction. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kunkel.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Board Chair and Chief. I'll let you decide how to handle the following question, but I think it more directly. This one relates to building off the conversation with Councillor Harris. And I think to Chief Johnston's, your comment about how to respond, you know, to those situations of harm. And so I'm wondering about where in the budget, with those sworn officers you've identified, or in general, just in the approaches, some of that may be around looking at, I'll say, some of the current situations happening with some of our schools. So I know historically there is a shift in policing from, I think, a presence in schools. I've had the benefit of learning more about some of the situational factors happening, I think, across the city, and we've had some discussions past term at this table where we talked a bit about how situations on school grounds then spill over into municipal property, and the interests across both bylaw officers to safety of community to in-school situations. And I'm not aware of any changes planned around perhaps bringing back in supports into schools. I didn't know if it was fair to ask you if you could comment on that, and if that's part of harm reduction. I am hearing, and unfortunately have sat with parents whose children have been hospitalized due to situations that have occurred in neighborhoods. But there is a dynamic around a relationship with schools. So is that something, when I look between the budget that you're presenting this evening and your strategic plan, we should appreciate, or is that part of the priority area of focus around relationships with school boards and policing?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle, I can advise you that certainly the board has addressed the issue and has asked the chief to take a look into it as to what exactly is in this budget. We don't drill down to that extent, but it has been addressed at the board level, and the chief and the senior command will be taking a look at it.
Thank you, and I think while I won't get into the minutiae of some of your budget, when it's coming at the same time as your strategic plan, I can tell you, residents I'm hearing from are quite curious to say, where does noise fit into the traffic calming strategies? Where does safety and partnerships with school boards come in? And so I think that, should it come in a future communication, would be helpful around how the budget or the resource focus may address those areas that are frequent, I would say, from at least residents that I'm speaking with. The other question I have is, again, when I look at this in comparison to your strategic plan, and you do talk about building a resilient organization, and slide 7, Chief, you did speak to kind of 5 sworn officers and other areas of focus. I did notice chaplain there. So I did want to ask broadly, knowing that we see chaplains used or embedded in different organizations. Is this a new position, or is this something that you're recommitting to? If you could speak to that and how it supports the diversity of your team.
Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle, I can certainly answer that. It is a second chaplain. Okay. So we have one, and we're adding a second chaplain, just to, again, partly to the growth of the service, and more importantly to the need and the wellness of the members of the service. In terms of our budget cost, it is not significant. It's uniforms and some training, so it's not significant to the budget. The position is very significant to the Barrie Police Service.
Thank you. I didn't recall that from past budgets, so I did want to just take a moment to kind of identify that. I appreciate that. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. Councillor Rietma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was very well done. I appreciated you bringing along and sending out, actually, your strategic plan the other day. And I wanted to ask you about 2 items on the strategic plan. Under priority 2, you talk about the collaborate with social service agencies to strengthen diversion referrals, and secondly, to continue to support the City of Barrie's community safety and well-being plan. And I know the police service has been very instrumental in the community and well-being plan. So I wanted to know sort of what are the things that you're planning on this year in fulfillment of those 2 actions?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Rietma. Again, I can advise you at the board that we've certainly, the Community and Safety Wellbeing Plan, there's 15 initiatives. The Barrie Police Service leads or co-leads in 11 of those 15. So it's extremely important to our service. In terms of collaboration, there's a number of things that we've addressed. We're looking at the Justice Center, the Barrie Health Accord, community outreach. There's a number of services. And in 2021, I believe the board directed the chief to continue to look and report on a quarterly basis for opportunities to look at alternative response mechanisms. So that is a priority that was identified by the board, and the chief will be reporting to us to see if there is any opportunity for which we can divert calls to police officers. The calls for service continue to increase. This year they went slightly down in terms of overall calls, but the emergency calls went up 10.4% in 2023 over 2022. So those increased calls for emergency service require our personnel, and we need to find a way, if there's an opportunity, to continue to divert those calls, and it is a priority.
Are any of the new staff resources that you are requesting focused on the diversion factor?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councilor Reba. At the budget level, we don't get down to specifics how a new sworn officer would be deployed. That's up to the chief and senior command. That said, as the chief said earlier in the evening, the 5 new officers will be frontline officers, and they will be deployed at the discretion of the chief and senior command. We as a board cannot comment on the operational. We can provide guidance and advice, but it will be the chief that will decide.
Thank you, Councilor Ritma. Councilor Morales, Hamilton, and then Councilor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. Question to the chief. Chief, fleet management. So, fleet management. So, obviously, as you know, I'm a big fan of EVs for almost all vehicles that we can do in the city of Barrie. Barrie Police has a unique opportunity because the police officer, at least like a boots-on-the-ground police officer, their office is essentially their vehicle. And while there are lots of intricate details about your laptop, your management, and other equipment, the difference is the evolution in technology that has happened in the last 5 years, but even the last year, between your standard EVs that you and I might think look like a little hatchback versus what the market is finally producing. As you know, of all people, the Mustang Mach-E, the Chevy Blazer EV is and in July they announced they're coming out with a built for police officers version. And I was just reading now, the harnesses are in the spots they need to be to have everything connected. The mileage is being produced, so they're both the Mach-E and the Blazer EV are getting 515 and 520 kilometers per charge. With 25-30% battery degradation in Canadian winters, that still is about 330-350 kilometers of available range. What do you envision, just because I know it doesn't make up the 52 million or the big category, but it still obviously makes up a significant portion of operating and then transferring to capital reserve for replacement. So could you in appropriate detail go into explain to council, I guess, your vision and your plans for conversion of Barrie Police's fleet to EV?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, I think I can answer that question for Councilor Morales. Yeah, there's the fleet's approximately 103, 104 units is the total fleet. Of that, 24% are either hybrid or electric vehicles. So the service continues to add. In the replacement this year is 13 new vehicles. Those are all replacements. They're not additional vehicles. So we are, although the service is growing, our fleet is reducing. We track all our vehicles. We have the software to track them, and that has allowed us to increase the amount of both electric and hybrid vehicles in the fleet.
So through you, Mayor Nuttall, I'm not asking about hybrids, so they're very distinct. So the reason I was directing the question to the chief is the chief and I have had conversations about his vision specifically for EV. So it's just no disrespect to you, of course. Is there what's the status update, chief, on where we are at with EV only implementation to the fleet? It sounds like we're taking a all of the above solution, which is fine to have hybrids, I guess, in the mix. But is that something that we're further down than when we talked about it last July, or where are we kind of at this spot?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you. Yes, so, Councillor, it's a little bit of supply and demand. And so the ability to get full EVs is still quite challenging. For our fleet, I can advise you that we are adding another 2 full EV vehicles this year have been ordered. But The hybrid vehicles, looking at our mileage and our usage, we've seen with the hybrids, I know they're very separate, but they certainly offer benefit. And I can advise you that the mileage traveled by all vehicles was reduced by 9.6, but the fuel usage was reduced by 16%. So the fuel percentage was greater than the mileage traveled. So the hypothesis is a hybrid vehicle effect. That is not insignificant when you consider the cost of fuel. And please appreciate, so it's, I am fully aware of the value of the EV, and I am a full supporter of it. But and I like to move fast, but there is a pace at which we can move and which we'd like to move, and it's a balance. So we are certainly exploring the hybrid vehicle and securing full EVs when we can. But we do see value in both the hybrid. It's the idling time of a vehicle that's really the damage to an engine with a internal combustion. Not to go into too much detail, but having said that, we do see some value in moving forward with the hybrid and the full electric.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And I think this is a question for Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, a lot of what I'm seeing in this presentation is there's externalities that are forcing the budget to increase beyond the standard that Barrie Police and we expected it to go up. Basically, a lot of provincial legislation mandates. And this might be a later question, not when they're still presenting, but do we have the capability to flesh out increases, at least I know we've done it in the past, Council, differentiates the DERF and other initiatives, but I'm hearing a bit of similar sentiments from Mayor Cam Guthrie in Guelph. He wants to implement a mental health response tax, and then he wants to flesh it out. I know other municipalities are talking about it. Is that something that we can get to that granular detail to flesh out basically provincially mandated, the financial impact of provincial mandated legislation, specifically as it relates to Barrie Police? Through you, Mayor Nuttall.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales and Council. Certainly, we can, as we have in the past, we can try and isolate. Well, if we have it in the binder, we can certainly see what we can do over the next week for you.
Okay, thank you. And it's not so much for blame, it's just like, again, the average person, they think you guys are asking for all this money. They think Barrie Police, they think council. And I think the more people flesh things out, the more they understand who's asking for what, and then a greater sense of allocation of responsibility and positive accountability then come forward when you make things more accountable for all departments.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and thank you to you both for the presentation and the service provided by Barrie Police. And while I'm a huge supporter, I am going to note that 7.28 is a substantial increase. So whether one can justify it or not, I do want to note that it is substantial. As a board, do you look at the overall budget spend on admin versus boots on the ground? And is there sort of a proportion or percentage that you try to aim for in terms of that balance?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Ms. Councillor Hamilton. No, we do not. In terms of our budget, it is total personnel. Again, where those resources are deployed and how they're used, that's up to the chief. And the financial reporting is not broken down. It's by salaries, wages, and benefits. So that breakdown is not available. Okay. We don't account for it either in the budget or in our financial reporting.
Okay, thank you. In follow-up to that, then, just the salary increases as well, and again, I'm sure they're granted. I come from the healthcare sector, so salaries have been frozen at 1% for years and years, and that's true for many other public sectors, and even the private sector, I think, over the last few years, not many people have seen increases. So the 3.5% increase in salaries without the addition of new staff, how is that number decided upon? Is that based on, issues and concerns with recruitment and retention? Is it based on market rates? Can you just explain how that number is landed upon?
Sure. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton. All our members of our service are currently under contract. The major service, part of the service, the frontline expires in 2023, and the senior management is 2024. So that 3.5% increase is all contractual contracts entered into prior to this year, as well as some promotions, as well as some retirements. But the 3.5 is all contractual.
Okay. And is that a sliding scale, the 3.5, or is it already paid at top salary, or do you ask for the 3.5 in terms of being prepared for any movement within that sliding scale?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor, that the increase is set in the contract.
Okay.
1.8 or 2%, but then there's changes in terms of promotions, advancements, et cetera. The total cost, if nothing changes, would be 3.5%.
Okay, thank you. One more question, if I may. So I've read, and I apologize, I don't remember where I read it. I've read multiple presentations and strategic plans, but 20% of calls are crime-related. Is that accurate?
What we call emergencies.
Emergency,
Yeah.
okay. Can you just describe the other 80% in terms of the contribution to mental health or social services, or what that other 80% looks like a little bit more?
I think I may have the breakdown. We certainly get that breakdown. Sorry, Mayor Nuttall, through you to Councillor Hamilton. We get that information every quarter at the board, and we review it. So those numbers are available. I don't think I have them in front of me now.
Okay.
Certainly, a major one is 911 hang-ups, which say, well, that doesn't require much of an ask of our police service. It certainly does. Mm-hmm. They all have to be followed up, looked into, because you don't, there's many of the calls for service are 911 hang-ups, but
Yeah.
that would be the majority in our quarterly. But the emergency numbers, as I made reference, are up 10.4% over 2022.
Is that based on population growth, or what can that be attributed to?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton, I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that.
No, that's okay. It's just the reason I'm asking in terms of what the calls are based on. I wonder if that data is used, just getting back to Councillor Harris's point, if that data is used to inform partnerships that are developed. I know you've got some pilot projects, I think, going on with health services as well. And I just wonder if that is based on, data and what the calls are being reflective of, so that you can inform who you should be partnering with and where it makes most sense.
Mayor Nuttall, through you, again, to Councillor Hamilton. Absolutely. We analyze the data. That's, again, going back to, the evidence-based policing and what the calls for service are and how we can better respond to those services. We are absolutely looking at that and looking for opportunities.
Okay. And then just one final comment, if I may, Mayor Nuttall, I apologize. Chief Johnston, I got your email today in regards to more information for the Citizens on Patrol program, which I think is fantastic, and I like hearing tonight as well, sort of the more community-based approach that is, obvious in your strategic plan, in your presentation tonight as well. And I understood from today's email that some of that budget for Citizens on Patrol comes from the volunteer and auxiliary budget. I'm just wondering if you can tell me what sort of, again, to me, that is a very cost-effective way to approach a number of safety concerns in our community, and a program that I think should be leveraged. I had the opportunity to do a ride-along with them this summer, so I'm just wondering from a budget perspective, what is allocated to them for the sustainability of that type of program?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, and that email was purposeful in so far as to advise and inform the council. So Citizens on Patrol is incredibly cost effective, but more importantly, it's certainly a community building and a legitimacy building service for the Barrie Police and our community. These are volunteers that help, that come out, that want to be part and make things better. In terms of specific budget, that becomes a challenging question in any initiative. And so I'll be brief insofar as that we have Citizens on Patrol, we fully fund them, we fully support them, but it's just, they're not fine lines that we can say this goes to them, this goes to that, because our Citizens on Patrol use some of the same equipment that our officers do in terms of technology, software, tracking. Like there's an app we've had developed in-house through our IT, and they use that. Our Citizens on Patrol use that, but so do our officers in terms of canvassing. So when they're assisting detectives, so the detectives can focus on an actual investigation, the Citizens on Patrol are out there using that canvassing app and feeding information directly into the detectives so they can action that. So it's not we have a vehicle. That vehicle is part of the fleet. The fleet belongs to the Barrie Police Service, that belongs to the City of Barrie. So it's one of those where you look at it. There's just not a fine line. We fully support it, and we continue to, and we're actually looking at expanding that and excited to explore where it's going to go.
Wonderful. Thanks very much for that clarity. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Negussi.
Thank you. Through to you, Mayor Nuttall. Thank you for the presentation. I just have a few comments / question. I mentioned this to Chief Johnson during our recent meeting, but I'm going to repeat that in front of the council. I believe that the police primary job is not to look after or search after criminals. The police primary job is to prevent crime before it's committed. So, and one of the crime prevention method is police visibility, police patrolling. And to be honest, during my campaign, there are a lot of people who live in fear. They feel they're not protected. And in my opinion, by having more police visibility in our neighborhood and the street, number one, we can prevent crime, and two, we can change our public, perception. So that's my comment, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neguse. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Nuttall. This is more of a comment and a little bit to what Councillor Hamilton had said. Thank you for the presentation, and I know the work that goes into this. You two are standing up here, but it's a team that puts this together in numbers, and I appreciate that. It is a large ask, and as I do sit on the board, I realize it, and it's tough when society is in a hole, in a tough place to look at a number like this, and some of the comments you hear is top-heavy policing, administrative, the third floor, not the boots on the ground, is what the public want. And my comment is Chief Johnston, I was, part of the selection of you as the chief, as a board member, and some of it was based on your forward thinking and, your beliefs in the, I don't want to say new policing, but, a better tomorrow of, a community collaboration and stuff. But I really hope to see a continuation of, less white shirts, to be frank, and more of the people in our neighborhoods as a community policing, as a relationship building. So I understand that this is, and I know the chair had said since 2020 we haven't had but it's actually, we've underfunded police for probably 12 to 13 years, just on the slide of 5.2% being legislative and contractual. This is, a large budget, and I'll keep my personal opinion on how it got to this point, but I just think that it's something we've really, I don't want to see this kind of increase every year, and I understand that we're playing a little bit of catch up, but I also want to see more of a presence and more of a utilize the resources we have, that we can see more of a presence in our communities. So thank you. I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, members of council. I didn't have the opportunity to vote on this budget as a member of the police board because it was the former mayor, not myself. I didn't have the opportunity to be part of the recruitment process for Chief Johnston because it was the previous police board, not the current one. And I won't give my full comments on this, obviously, because we're going to have this debate in terms of the actual budget itself. I will say this, that there's a lot of language around defunding, unfunding, increased funding. And my personal belief is if there's a complement that's required, if it's not met, it's a defunding of the police service. That's happened. It's happened for years. It's my personal opinion. There'll be lots of different opinions around this table in the public. I'll also say this, Chief Johnston, that what you're hearing from Councillor Neguse, from Councillor Hamilton, from Deputy Mayor, in other ways from Councillor Kungle, from Councillor Ritma around the table, is the idea of both presence of police and the direction of calls as they come in, going into the right places so that help can be given to individuals. And as I see it, we need to see more on the ground, and I hope you take the next 24 months to do that. It's something I heard at the door quite often, and time will tell the tale on that. But thank you for your presentation this evening. Thank you for taking the time to come to us. And thank you for bringing some real information and transparency around policing in our city, because it is something that I think that will help our residents understand both what you do, how you do it, and also the requirement for funds to do it. So we ask you to keep our city safe, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That was the police budget update. We will continue to bring you more budget and other news. Thank you for watching.